Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by sharing exactly what I've been doing in my own allotment, my own vegetable garden, based on over 30 years of growing my own food. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about doing. It's a fantastic hobby, I have to say. Now this week we have been harvesting our garlic. We have an update from the kitchen garden, plus we have had an email come in with a bit of a question. So let's start off this week down on the allotment. Well, as you can tell, I'm here on the allotment, and what we've been doing this week has been rather good, I have to say, a really good week. I haven't been able to visit the allotment much in the evenings on the way home from work. The weather this week took a nasty turn. We've had quite a bit of rain, which is very, very welcome. Don't get me wrong, we needed the rain and it certainly has saved me a job. But I did manage, every evening I did pop down, but not as much as I would have liked. And all I've done is just a few minutes pulling out a few weeds. But it pays off. It does mean that when I came down here today on the weekend, I could spend quite a few hours doing jobs that I really wanted to do. And the first job was harvesting our garlic. Now, my garlic has been planted since September, and normally I would be harvesting it around the beginning of July. So I've harvested it a little bit early this year. But I've been reading a lot of information lately that tells me that actually I've been harvesting my garlic a little bit late in the past, and it's better to harvest it around 2 weeks before I usually do. So I did. Basically, when the leaves have started to turn brown, they're not going to photosynthesize anymore. They're past it, so that's the time to get them out. Now this year we have not had as much rust on our leeks as we normally did. We still got some, don't get me wrong, but I did notice that quite a few of the plants that I planted out did seem to die off, and I didn't know why that was. But today I harvested my garlic, and 4 varieties. We went through them and we had some good ones, we had some okay garlic. But one of the things I noticed on quite a few of the garlic that we harvested was this sort of white fungi. Now this is possibly 2 things it could be. It could be just mycorrhizal fungi, which is great, or it's onion white rot, which is not so good. I'm going to go away and do a bit of a study and just see if I can work out. I think it's mycorrhizal fungi, to be honest with you. However, the garlic that did have it on did have a bit of rot to the stem, so it could be onion white rot. If it is onion white rot, well, that could be a bit of a problem because it could be in the soil for quite a while. Luckily, we're not going to be using that bed for onions or garlic for about 6 years. So I'm not complaining, but it's something we need to be aware of. As I said, I harvested all my garlic and I'm quite happy with the amount that we've got. What I'll do now is I've given them a good wash, and then I will just place them in my shed to dry out a bit. And once they dry out, the largest bulb of each variety will be popped to one side so that I can replant them back in September, and that will be next year's garlic. The rest, now normally we try and store it as garlic bulbs, but what we've decided to do instead is we will turn it into easy garlic. Basically put all the garlic cloves into a blender with a bit of oil and blend it together. I believe we've got to heat it up so it doesn't get botulism, and then we basically store that in the fridge or in the freezer, and every time we need garlic we just get a teaspoon out and add it to whatever we're using it for. Reason we're doing that is that garlic stores relatively well, but we want it to store better. We grow a lot of garlic. I've still got garlic growing at home. We want it to last for considerably longer. However, I'm happy with what we've got. We've got well over 40 bulbs of garlic, so that's pretty good for us. Now after that, I moved up to the very top of my allotment where I have my neighbours, and I've complained quite a bit lately how, well, basically last year they didn't attend their plot at all. They have now been kicked off and nobody's taken it on, so it's become quite a ramble mess with high weeds, brambles and everything that comes over onto my plot. Now, at the very top, I have a collection of fruit, bushes and rhubarb, which I inherited when I took on this plot. And it's always been an area that's been difficult to keep tidy. I've been trying to do things. What I found is working quite well is laying down cardboard and then a mulch on top. This year it's been straw. That is helping, but what is happening, because the neighbours' weeds are so high, they're coming over and interrupting my area, making it difficult to get any of my fruits when they're ready for harvesting, making it difficult to care for any of my plants in there, and basically making it look quite messy. So what I did is I got my strimmer out and I actually started to strim about a foot into my neighbour's plot just to hack it back a bit. Unfortunately, I ran out of string again, so I couldn't continue with the strimmer, but I went into my shed and I found a rather dangerous looking tool. I believe it's called a bill hook, and what it basically is a rather large knife on the end of a very long stick, and you basically hack through brambles. If it's sharp, it will work quite well. Hack through brambles, hack through nettles with that, and it actually did work rather well. It's not a scythe, but it's very similar to a scythe. But it cleared away the brambles, the nettles and everything there rather well. However, I could only do about half of the plot because I had a load of plastic bags and stuff just dumped, which were also full of weeds, and that I just couldn't get to. And what's annoying about that is that's the area I really wanted to get to, because the brambles are coming over and interfering with my currant bushes, which I've got a good lot of red currants on there, but I can't get to them because they are being blocked out rather annoyingly. I'm going to keep at it. I'm going to keep coming down during the week with my strimmer and just strim it back and see if we can try and tidy it up that bit more, so that then we have that area back. It's really annoying though. I'm sure we've all had troubles with neighbours' plots, but hey, it is what it is. Now, we are in the beginning of June still, and what has been great is the harvests. I've got broad beans and peas. I've also harvested the first early potatoes, or a few first early potatoes, I should say. First time I've harvested potatoes this year. I'm really pleased with it. This is, of course, using the straw mulch. And I've got to say, the potatoes that I've picked out so far look fantastic. Good size, look really healthy. Good, clean, easy to get out the ground as well. So really, really happy with the potatoes that we've got. The straw mulch does seem to be working as well. I am finding myself slowly, and you've probably gathered if you've listened to this over the last few weeks, slowly starting to really like the use of straw as a mulch. I can see myself using it a lot more moving forward. Well, I am using it more and more. I'm using it in areas where I would normally use grass clippings. Grass clippings is still good, but weeds still come through. Straw weeds can still come through, but it's a bit of a harder time for the weeds. And I think if the ground is clear before you put the mulch down, makes all the difference. Multi-pronged attack. Of course, we've also harvested some rhubarb, and a couple of cherries were also ready as well. Now, of course, because I've harvested all the garlic, that bed was empty. And what I've done to fill that bed up, because I don't want empty spaces on my allotment. I want to be productive. I want everything to be full of edible plants. So what I've done is I had a load of mini bell tomato plants. I've brought those down and I've planted them all into that bed. Just filled that bed up with the tomatoes. There was a few wild poppy seeds that have germinated in them, grown poppies, which we've left as well. But tomatoes in the place where garlic was once before means that we're going to get more tomatoes, means that no empty spaces, which makes it easier to maintain. And that is something we're going to keep doing as we move further forward. Overall, really, really happy with the allotment. Everything is coming together, as I've said. I did go through this sort of feeling that I'm very behind on the allotment, but actually now I sit here and I think to myself, we're doing all right. We're learning lots as well. Right, we've also been doing a lot back at the kitchen garden, so I'm going to head back there and share with you what's been going on at home. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in Supporters Club this week. Well, I'm just jumping into this podcast and just going to remind you to please rate and review this podcast if you are enjoying it. Rating and reviewing means that more people get to find this podcast. It pushes the algorithms in our favour, and it's really something that gives us some potential feedback, which is really valuable for us. But not only that, if you are enjoying this podcast, you want to help support the work that we do, then please consider becoming a member of our Supporters Club. Our Supporters Club is set up to keep this podcast running. It costs a lot of money to keep this podcast running, and I cannot do it without the support of our supporting members. But I'm not the type that believes in just handing over money to support things. I believe in giving something back in return. And what I've done is I've set up the Supporters Club to not only give you extra behind the scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ, but once a month you also receive our seed pack. And in that seed pack you get our mini newspaper, which gives you a few ideas and a few updates and something to read during the month. But you also get a collection of seeds that can be sown in that very month. Now, as an example, this week we've been sowing our Belotti beans from that pack. Belotti beans are a fantastic bean to grow, not just for a freshly eaten bean, but also for drying. One of my favourites, I've got to say, and I do actually grow quite a few of them. Now, if that sounds like something you would be interested in, it costs just £5 to be a member for a month. I highly recommend you go and do it. I really do, because I think it's an absolute bargain, but you also help support this podcast. Head to the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk to find out more and sign up. Right, back to the gardening.
Afternoon, Rich. Just wanted to say thank you for another good week's worth of podcasts. As I think I've said it before, that it's lovely to hear a podcaster or a YouTuber admitting to having failures. So many of the other channels only see the positives. You know, I've had the same problem as you have this year with the clay soil. Because it's been so dry, I don't think anything's germinated very well. So I've gone back to re-sowing again in paper pots, and then hopefully I'll be able to drop the paper pots in the ground and have a bit more success. So once again, thanks very much, and speak to you soon. Bye.
Well, that was Stuart Jackson, everybody, and it's always a pleasure to hear from Stuart Jackson. He's a very good friend of mine, very long-term listener to this podcast, gets involved in everything. He's also a forest school teacher. But the point that Stuart made about always sharing my failures, this is something that I've always been keen to do. For me, it's something that I believe we learn the most from. If everything worked first time every time, we wouldn't really learn anything from it. And the failure that Stuart is alluding to there is the fact that I mentioned last week that a lot of my seeds that I sowed directly in the soil have failed to germinate. Well, this last week, the first week in June, we have had quite a bit of rain, and what's interesting is that I've noticed, as I sit here looking at that very bed where I sowed a lot of root crops, some of those seeds have now germinated. I can see some turnips, some beetroot, some more spinach, everything like that. I can't see any carrots is the only thing, but that may come in time. Now, of course, I did plant out some plants in this bed, chilies and tomatoes, etc., etc. So luckily, there's still space amongst them. It's going to become a bit of a mixed bed. But this proves to me exactly what I thought. It's the fact that the soil is now moist enough for those seeds to germinate. And it proves to me that it was just the fact that the soil was dry, that my seeds were not germinated. And this is what I mean. We learn from our mistakes. We learn a lot from our mistakes, and it's been a real pleasure to see this. Luckily, we're going to have plenty of these seeds growing, plenty of these plants, and we'll see what happens in the future, of course. Now, Here at home, I have had a really good day working on the home plot, I've got to say. Throughout the week, we're keeping on top of our feeding, our watering and things like that, just making sure that the plants are getting the very best care. But what I've really concentrated on here at home is, of course, we've been looking after our plants, making sure they're weeded and watered. We've also been concentrating on tidying up around my greenhouse area. So inside my greenhouse we have my auto pots, which are an integrated irrigation system, and they have been fantastic. I'm really singing the praises for the auto pots. The main reason is that we've harvested our first cucumbers, but those pots in there are producing some of the best cucumbers, tomatoes, chilies, peppers, aubergines that I've ever grown at an early stage. So I'm very, very happy with the auto pots. And this is the main reason that we're going to continue using it. But I've had to tidy up outside the area. We are still having lots of young plants that need to find homes for. And a lot of them are now going down to the allotment in empty spaces. I've already mentioned the garlic that has came up. And as those spaces become empty, we're planting out more plants in their place. This is why we continue to sow seeds right throughout the year, so that when beds become empty or plants become harvested, we can quickly fill them with more plants. And we've obviously got our kale seedlings, our cabbage seedlings, all things like that that are becoming ready to go into their beds as places become available. One of the things that I've also been doing this week is clearing out my little shed. This is my 8-foot by 6-foot shed that I bought when we first moved into this house. It was a mistake to buy, in all honesty. It's been a good shed, but it was a cheap shed and it's not really lasted, to be honest. And the plan is, I've spoke about this last year. The plan was to do it over winter last year and I didn't do it. But I'm slowly emptying everything out from inside that shed, and then we're going to take that shed down and pot a new shed in its place, which is going to be an exciting development. But the plan is, inside the shed we are going to have my auto pot set up in there, ready for all my plants. So it's going to be a seed sowing station and a plant growing station. That's the exciting plan, but it is all in development. Now, elsewhere in the garden, of course, we've got a few more things that have been going on. So the garlic here at home I haven't harvested as of yet, but it is looking like it's not far off being ready. I don't think the garlic that we're growing here at home is going to be as good as the garlic we're growing down on the allotment, because I've popped them in quite close together with each other. But what I will say, we planted out a bulb that we brought from the supermarket, among all the others, and that does look like it has grown quite well. So it's been an interesting experiment. Of course, I will fill you in more when we actually harvest all that garlic, as and when it happens. However, one of the best things that we have had achieved this week, see, we've harvested our cucumbers, but we've also harvested our first peas. Now, I love peas, but we can never grow enough of them. So I've dedicated an entire bed to growing peas this year, and we've harvested our first peas. Now, okay, not enough to make a meal, but it was enough that we were happy with what we got. And hopefully, the thing with peas, of course, the more you harvest, the more peas you get. So we keep harvesting them. It should encourage them to flower and produce more peas. That is what we really want. So altogether, we're really happy with everything going on here in the kitchen garden. Everything is coming together. One major job that I've also done is the shredding of more of our branches from our trees, the elder tree that I took down throughout the winter, and we've started taking down some branches on the ash tree. Now, shredding, of course, gives us wood chip, which, as you know, we are filling up a compost bin with wood chip to rot down on its own and see if we can use that in compost mixes next year. But we're also using it in our hot bin versus Dalek competition, or trial, I should say. Now, hot bin versus Dalek is basically we're filling up a hot bin and a Dalek composter with the same material and the same quantities, and we're going to see which produces the best compost and the fastest. What I'm noticing, obviously we need a mix of green and brown, so grass clippings would be the greens and wood chip the browns on paper and things like that. What I'm noticing is a definite increase in heat when we add wood chips to the mix, and it is producing, I'm finding with the hot bin, producing compost a lot faster. It's quite eye-opening because we're not quite at the 90 days yet, but it is quite eye-opening to see just how well it is doing. What I'm also noticing with the hot bin, the more we seem to put in there, the faster it seems to work. I haven't even got anywhere near filling it up yet, so it is proving rather well. Now, interestingly, I've actually had an email from Andy that I'm going to read to you in just a moment from the Podding Shed. In the meantime, let's find out what Chef Scott has for us this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef Scott with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Hi, it's Scott here with this week's recipe. And this week we have the Seed of the Month recipe. And this week's recipe is kale roasted with chickpeas, red onion, cumin and lemon, served with whipped feta and hot honey. I have shared recipes for whipped feta and hot honey before, so to save me repeating myself, I won't be sharing the recipes for them now, but I will include these sub-recipes in the written recipe that will be on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. So, with that being said, let's head to the kitchen and hear how it's made. As usual, you can find this recipe and others on the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk and on my Instagram page, Seed to Table, Plot 13. For this recipe, you will need 2 red onions cut into quarters, 6 cloves of garlic peeled, 1 tin of drained chickpeas, 1 lemon cut in half, 1 teaspoon of ground cumin, 1 teaspoon of ground coriander, and 200 grams of kale. Method: in a hot frying pan with a little oil on a high heat, add the lemon flesh side down, followed by the onions and garlic, and fry until the onion and lemon are caramelised a little bit. Then add the chickpeas and spices and season with salt and pepper. Then add this to a mixing bowl and allow to cool a little. Then add the kale into the mixing bowl and toss together with a little olive oil and transfer to a couple of roasting trays and roast in a preheated oven set at 200 degrees Celsius for 10 to 15 minutes. Then served with the whipped feta and a drizzle of hot honey. And that's the recipe done, and that's it from me this week.
Well, that was once again another fabulous recipe from the lovely Chef Scott there. Kale, absolutely delicious, well worth growing, well worth eating. Now, I have had an email from Andy from Hotbin, who we had on a few weeks ago in episode 606, talking about hot bin composting, of course. And as you know, I've already mentioned this, we are doing the hot bin versus Dalek competition, where we're seeing just what can produce the best compost. However, his email isn't actually about hot bin. It's actually at the end of episode 607, I asked, what are you doing with your kids in the garden and how difficult is it to really get them involved? And Andy came back with an answer to that. He says, I won't read the whole email because it is quite a long email, but he says, honestly, it can be difficult. But the trick that he's found is that to try and make it fun and entertaining, if you can gamify gardening, recycling or compost activities, kids are more than likely to ditch the screens and get stuck in. He goes on to say that just last week we kicked off a sunflower growing competition. We each planted one in a pot using a mix of seed compost and our own hot bin compost. Now it's a full-on battle for the tallest sunflowers. The kids are watering theirs religiously and checking on growth daily. But he goes on to say, it is hot bin, so he's built composting into everyday life. After the meals, the kids scrape the plates into their kitchen caddy. Then we mix the daily scraps with paper or card to make the compost mixture before feeding the hot bin. They love checking the thermometer and watching it heat up. It's became a bit of a ritual. But also other simple wins include bug hunts in the garden or in the compost, building mini bug hotels, planting and growing seeds in unusual containers like old wellies, pulling weeds with kid-sized tools. They actually enjoy this one and ask to do it when they spot any weeds. Tearing cardboard and paper for the hot bin. Who knew shredding junk mail could be so satisfying? I think they just love distraction. Helping spread compost around the garden, especially where they've planted some themselves. It's not always tidy, he goes on to say, but sometimes a bit of a bribery involves stickers, leaderboards and the occasional bit of cold hard cash. But overall, it's been a good way to spend time together and get them moving and build real awareness of how waste can be turned into something useful. So we're going to have Andy back on in the podcast in the future to talk about this and talk about, again, more about hot bin Dalek. But he does say we have seen a few sales off the back of the voucher code VGP10HB. If you are looking to buy a hot bin, that'll give you 10% off. Of course, that is in the show notes. However, the other part that I wanted to read out is a PPS that he's added at the end of this email. As a listener, I'm eager to learn how full all your water butts are after recent rainfall. So this is actually a really good question, very, very topical. Now, I've got 16 water butts overall in my garden. I have kindly nicknamed the water butt kin because I have so many water butts. But I think it is a precious resource. I think it's something that we should all strive to collect as much as possible. It doesn't cost anything other than the cost of the water butt itself. It doesn't cost anything to store rainwater. It falls from the sky. We can use it in the garden. So out of my 16 water butts, they were getting incredibly low. My one out the front of the house, which I use for watering the plants out the front and for washing the car, that was down about half full. But the ones out in the back garden, the other 15, we have got about one that had about 3/4 full, and that's quite a big water butt. So it's probably 220 water litres. So there's probably about 125 litres of water in that. And that was to do my veggie pod that I built a few weeks ago using a pump. All my other water butts were pretty low, pretty empty, except for 4 water butts that I've got behind my shed at the back of a garden, which are my emergency supply. They're there if I need them in an emergency. Well, what about the recent rainfall? Well, we have had quite a bit of rain over the last week, particularly this Saturday just gone. I took this absolutely amazing photo of the rain just coming down like steroids. And what I found then is all my water butts that were attached to downpipes, particularly the ones on the houses, they were full up by the end of that rainfall. So we've gone from being pretty low to being back to pretty full. Now, the downside is we're going to be using that rainwater throughout the dry periods, especially through the summer. So what I've had to do is just pump some of this rainwater off into some of my other water butts, so that if we do get any more rain, which we do look like we're being predicted some rain this week, we can still continue to collect as much as we possibly can. This is very much the routine that I follow. I want to try and make sure that my water butts that are connected to downpipes are empty when the rest are full, if that makes sense. So, how many water butts are connected to downpipes, I hear you ask? Well, that's a very good question, and I'm just quickly done the sums. We've got 5 of my 16 water butts are actually at full now. Now, ideally, we'd have the water butts, as they get full, they overfill over into another water butt. And we've got a couple that do that, and they haven't quite filled up to overfill into the other water butts. But in time, I'm sure that will happen. So it just goes to show it is well worth having water butts in your garden. Right, well, it is coming to the end of this week's podcast. I haven't had any reviews or ratings this week. If you would like to rate and review, though, we would really appreciate it. It really does go a long way to helping us out. Of course, you can also become a supporting member if you want to help support the work that we do as well. Details on that on our website, theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Now, while you're on our website, you can of course leave a comment on the bottom of a blog post, or you can do like Stuart did earlier and leave us a voicemail. The voicemails are fantastic because they do add another voice to the podcast. And I'm all about different voices. Of course, you can email me just like Andy did, richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. It'd be great to get more emails. They actually help structure this podcast as well. That's richard@theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. And of course, you can find us on social media. Please do give us a like and a follow on social media. Now, we will be back again next time. We're off to Gardener's World Live, so you will hear about that next week. But until then, please take care.